difficulties here. Today I'm going to talk about the what and why of continuous discovery. I'm Teresa Torres. I will share that I've gotten to work with teams all over the world in a wide variety of contexts, some as small as a 2-person startup, some as big as multinational companies with hundreds of thousands of employees. I like to share that because the framework and tactics that I'm going to share have been tested in a lot of different contexts. So I want to encourage you to think about how you might take some of these ideas back to your own organizations. So when we talk about discovery, we often talk about it in contrast with delivery. So I'm just going to start at the beginning. We tend to use discovery to represent the work that we're doing to decide what to build. And we contrast that with delivery, which is the work that we do to build, ship, and maintain a production quality product. Now, this distinction is becoming important because we often put a lot of emphasis on delivery and we forget to put equal emphasis on discovery. We're recognizing that we need to make good decisions about what we build, not just to build in a good way. The other shift that we're seeing is from a project mindset to a more continuous mindset. A lot of us, when we look at discovery, we know we should include the customer in the process, but we tend to do that from a project mindset where we talk to customers at the beginning or at the very end, but not throughout. So what I'm going to talk about is a continuous discovery process. And I'm going to start by defining continuous discovery. I define it as, at a minimum, weekly touch points with customers by the team building the product, where they conduct small research activities in pursuit of a desired product outcome. Now, there's a lot that we'll break down here. I'm going to start with this first line of why should we be engaging with our customers every week? This is really about finding a continuous cadence. So as product people, and by that I mean product managers, designers, software engineers, anybody who's working on a digital product, we're making decisions every day. Some of them are big strategic decisions like which customer should we serve, what outcome should we go after. Others are more everyday decisions like what do we label this button? How should this workflow work? What should the underlying data model support? Most of us know that those decisions will make better decisions if we include feedback from the customer. The reason for this is that we develop expertise on our product. We know where everything lives, we know how everything works, we know what it's capable of, but our customers don't have that same expertise. And so we want to make sure that we don't start making decisions that work for us, but don't work for our customer. And one of the easiest ways to do this is to simply increase the frequency in which we engage with our customers. So the more often we talk to our customers, the more likely we're going to see the gap between how we think about the product and how our customers think about the product. There's another advantage to this continuous cadence, and that it starts to unlock a co-creation mindset. A co-creation mindset is when we take our knowledge of what's possible with technology and combine it with our customers' knowledge of their own context, their own world. And as a result, we get better products. Now, whenever I talk about co-creation, somebody thinks about the Steve Jobs quote where he said, customers don't know what they want until we show it to them. Or maybe the Henry Ford quote where he allegedly said, if I had asked customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. Now, I want to be clear. When I talk about co-creating with our customers, we're not going to go to our customers and say, what should we build? That's our job to figure out what's the right technology, what's possible. Instead, we're going to ask them about their lives. We're going to collect their stories. We're going to listen for their needs, their pain points, and their desires. And so that's the combination of that knowledge, our knowledge of what's possible with our customers' knowledge of their lives is what helps us develop better products. So this idea of a weekly cadence, it's really helping us infuse more of our daily decisions with feedback from our customers. Now, it's really important that the team that is building the product is the one that is engaging with customers on a regular basis. This is important because some companies treat this like we have a discovery team that hands off to a delivery team, or maybe we have a market research team or a business intelligence team that hands off research to the delivery team. The challenge with both of those models is that we end up with handoffs, we get a lot of rework and we lose a lot of context. So we see this in the product world. We used to let product managers write requirements and they would get handed off to designers who would then do all the design work, and then that would get handed off to the engineers who would implement. And what do we see in that waterfall model? We see designers hit design constraints and we have to rewrite requirements. We see engineers estimate things for 4 times longer than we have, and so we have to rewrite requirements. And so instead of having handoffs, we're starting to recognize the team that's building the product needs to work together from the very beginning, and they need to be engaging with customers. And this starts with this idea of a product trio. So instead of these handoffs between these roles, we're suggesting that a product manager, a designer, and a software engineer should be working together from the beginning, collaborating on making good decisions about what to build. And if this team is going to make good decisions about what to build, we want them engaging with customers on a regular basis. Now, most of us have more than 3 people on our team. We have additional engineers. We have QA folks or release managers, depending on our DevOps strategies. Depending on how we engage with the rest of the business, we might have data analysts or product marketing managers or customer success folks. Maybe we have the luxury of a user researcher on our team. So I want to be clear, the trio isn't the only team that engages with customers. They're not the only part of the team that's involved in discovery, but they're the leaders. They're leading the discovery effort. And then they can pull different people in based on the types of decisions that they're making. So this idea is flexible. And here's the trade-off you want to consider. We're going to trade off speed of decision-making with quality of decision-making. The more people involved in every decision, the slower we're going to go. However, the more relevant cross-functional roles represented in any decision, the better decision we'll make. So this idea of the trio is we've learned from experience, this is the smallest team that we want involved in every discovery decision. And then we can invite other folks based on the type of decision that we're making, but we don't want to invite everybody to every decision because we'll slow way down. So what this might look like is if you're working on the discovery for your go-to-market strategy, you might invite your product marketing manager to be a part of those discovery decisions. If you're working on how to instrument your product, you might invite your data analyst to be a part of those discovery decisions, but you're not including everybody in every decision. So it flexes based on who's on your team and the type of decision that you're making. But what's really important is that we take a cross-functional approach, that we work together from the beginning, and that this team has direct access to customers so they can start to see how the decisions they're making work for their customers. Okay, so now we talked about the team that's building the product, not a separate discovery team. The team that's building the product is engaging with customers every week. Let's start to look at what are we going to do when we're engaging with customers every week. Our goal is to conduct small research activities in pursuit of a desired product outcome. So we're not going to take our old project-based research methods and try to jam them into a weekly cadence. And we're also not doing research for research's sake. We're starting with an outcome, and we're going to look at 2 small research activities we can do on a regular basis that will help us make sure that we build better products. The visual that I like to use to help teams stay on track is called an opportunity solution tree. If you're new to this, we're going to walk through how it works. It starts by defining a clear outcome at the top of your tree. This is a metric, it's a number, it's something we can measure. This is different from what we've historically done. Historically, we've asked product teams, please deliver this roadmap. Here's a list of outputs, deliver them by this specific date. What that means is that in January, when we give a team a 12-month roadmap, we're suggesting that we can predict the future, that we know in January what we should build in November. And what we're seeing as an industry is this is just not possible. There's too much uncertainty. There's too much ambiguity. If you started January 2020 with a fixed roadmap, my guess is by March of 2020, when we all shifted to working from home and we saw a global slowdown in the economy, your roadmap had to change. So what we're recognizing is that starting with outputs doesn't work. We need to take a step back and say, what impact do we expect those outputs to have? and to look at the outcomes we're trying to drive. Now, for most of us, the outcomes we're going to start with are going to be derived from our business model. They're business outcomes, right? I'm going to use today in my talk Netflix as my examples. That's because I suspect Netflix is available in most of your countries and you're broadly familiar with how they work. So Netflix is a subscription business. If I look at their business model, the metrics they care about are things like number of subscribers, how much money those subscribers pay each month, and how many months those subscribers stick around. So subscriber retention. Those are 3 different outcomes. And I could tell a different product team to focus on those outcomes. So let's say that I told a product team, your job is to drive subscriber retention. We're not sure what we should build. We're going to experiment and iterate our way to figure it out. But we know the impact we need you to have is to increase subscriber retention. Now, because that's a business outcome, we want that product team to translate it to a behavior that occurs in the product. That usually requires a theory of how does my product support the business. In Netflix case, it could be as simple as, we believe that if you watch Netflix more, you'll be more likely to retain your Netflix subscription. And so we're going to measure viewing minutes per week. So that's an outcome that would go at the top of our tree. We're going to try to increase the average viewing minutes per week. Once that's in place, we want to look at what are the customer needs, pain points, and desires, which are collectively called opportunities, that if we addressed them would drive our outcome. So our outcome represents business value, opportunities represent customer value. And so this is where we're starting to look at how can we serve our customer in a way that creates value for our business. And we'll talk a little bit about how do we discover opportunities. Now, in this model, outputs do matter. We do have to discover the solutions that have the potential to address those opportunities. And what this visual is doing is it's helping us stay aligned. We're looking for solutions that create value for our customers by addressing specific opportunities in a way that creates value for our business by driving our business outcome. So we're going to look at how does a product team do this? So they're engaging with customers every week. What are the research activities they're doing every week to discover both opportunities and to discover solutions? Okay, so it does start with defining a clear outcome. In an ideal world, this is a two-way negotiation between your product leader, who's usually going to communicate in that business outcome, and your product team that needs to translate that to a product outcome. So in the Netflix example, that the business leader might say increase retention. The product trio might say, we believe we can do that by increasing viewing engagement. Once that's in place, we're going to look at our first small research activity that we're going to do on a regular cadence. And that's, we're going to interview to discover opportunities. So we're interviewing to discover customer needs, customer pain points, and customer desires. Now, the reason why most teams don't interview on a regular basis is because it's genuinely hard to find a customer to talk to every day, every week. So what I recommend teams do is they start by automating their recruiting process. Now, what I mean by this is I want you to wake up on Monday morning and look at your calendar and see that there's already an interview on your schedule without you having to do anything to put it there. I'm going to give you 3 strategies for how to do this. The first is you can recruit people while they're using your product or service. This works extremely well for recruiting B2C consumers, and it works extremely well for recruiting B2B end users. The way this works is within your product, while you have your customer's attention, you do an interstitial like you see here, or a pop-up, or just somewhere embedded in the site. You ask people if they're interested in participating in an interview. When they say yes, you can pair this with scheduling software where they can just choose a time on your calendar. So you don't have to do anything yourself to schedule that interview. Now, if you're trying to recruit B2B buyers or decision makers, I'm going to give you a second strategy. This is where you can work with your customer-facing teams, your sales teams, your account management teams, your customer success teams, your support teams, and you can define triggers for them. Instead of recruiting from within your product, you can recruit from the people that are already on the phone with them. So you can say, look, colleagues that are already on the phone with my customers, If you're talking to a customer who has this specific need, please go ahead and schedule an interview on our calendar. And then give these teams access to your calendar so that you don't have to be involved in the scheduling. The vast majority of teams that I work with are using one of these two strategies to automate their recruiting process. This third strategy is going to be a good one for if your customers are extremely hard to reach, but I want you to think about it as a starter strategy. So if your customers are really hard to reach, you can set up a customer advisory board. This is where you build long-term relationships with a small number of customers that you go back to over and over again. Now think about this as a starter strategy. If it's really hard to talk to your customers, this can help you get started. But over time, you're going to want to move to one of the first two strategies, because the risk of this strategy is that you build a product that works for a subset of your market, but not the whole market. So with time, you want to be interviewing for variation, and you want to talk to a wide diversity of customers. So you might use this to help you get started, but then you want to quickly move to one of the other two strategies. Okay, now that we know how to get a customer in the room, let's talk about how do we ask the right questions. With interviewing, our goal is to avoid speculation. So if I return to my Netflix example, I might want to ask you questions like, what do you like to watch on Netflix? How do you decide what to watch? What device do you watch on? Who do you like to watch with? How often do you watch? The challenge is if I ask you these questions, your answers aren't going to be reliable. And that's not just you, that's everybody. All humans are not very good at answering direct questions out of context. It's just the way our brains are wired. Our brains will generate fast answers, but they're going to be influenced by a variety of cognitive biases, and our answers are not necessarily going to reflect our behavior in reality. So to fix this problem, we want to instead focus on collecting specific stories. So I don't want to ask you all those who, what, why, how questions. I want to say, tell me about the last time you watched Netflix, and I want to collect that story. And I want to listen for those who, what, why, how questions in the context of the story. So I can listen for, how did you decide what to watch? Where were you? What device were you on? But because it's collected in the context of a specific story, your answers will be far more reliable. The other thing that happens when we collect specific stories is we start to hear needs, we start to hear pain points, we start to hear desires. Opportunities emerge from customer stories. And that's what's going to allow us to build out the green space on this visual. It's going to help us look at all the opportunities we could address and make a much more strategic decision about how we might reach our outcome. Now, once we've mapped out the opportunity space, we do want to choose a target opportunity to start working on. So we want to work with one opportunity at a time. And when we do that, we want to work with multiple solutions for the same target opportunity. Now, this is different from what most of us do. Most of us, we hear a customer need, we jump to the first solution, and we start testing, is this idea going to work? The problem with that is we start asking what decision-making researchers call a whether or not question. This is when we ask, is our idea good or not? Right? So if you're prototyping just one idea, you're looking for, is my idea good or not? If you're testing one idea, you're asking, is this idea good enough or not? The problem with this framing is it exacerbates two different biases. The first is called the escalation of commitment. This means the more we invest in an idea, the more we identify with it, the more we fall in love with it. And the challenge with that is it exacerbates a second bias, which is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias suggests that we're going to see all the evidence that suggests our idea is fantastic and miss all the evidence that suggests our idea is flawed. So we could be doing all the right discovery activities, but if we're working with one idea at a time, we're not getting as much value out of those activities as we could. So instead, we want to set up a good compare and contrast decision where we work with multiple solutions, we compare and contrast them against each other, and we ask which of these ideas looks most promising. This framing will trick your brain into seeing the pros and cons of each of the solutions, and you'll end up making a better decision. This is an important enough concept that I'm going to give you a visual to help you remember it. This is Usain Bolt. I believe he is still the world's fastest 100-meter runner. He's the world record holder for the fastest 100-meter dash. If you saw Usain Bolt running around a track by himself, and I asked you, is he fast? I want you to hear a whether or not question. Is he fast or not? And I want you to ask, is he fast relative to what? Is he fast relative to a cheetah? Probably not. Is he fast relative to a Tesla? In the first 100 meters, I would pay to see that race. Is he fast relative to other humans? Absolutely. What we're seeing in the photo on the right is a compare and contrast decision where we have a clear front runner. When we compare and contrast solutions, this is what we're looking for. If you've ever gotten prototype feedback and wondered, is that good enough? Is that feedback good enough? You're falling into that whether or not trap. If you've ever gotten a conversion rate, you ran a test and you got a conversion rate and you wondered, is that conversion rate good enough or not? You're falling into that whether or not trap. Instead, what you want to do is compare solutions against each other and look for a clear front runner like we see in the photo on the right. Now, the reason why most of us don't do this is because we don't have time. We barely have time to test one solution, let alone 3. And that's because we're still doing big, large-scale project-based research to evaluate our ideas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through an example where I'm going to introduce our second small research activity. And this is, we're going to take 3 different solutions and we're going to break them down into their underlying assumptions. And we're going to use assumption testing to our second research activity to rapidly evaluate our solutions. We're going to start the week on Monday with a set of solutions, and we're going to end the week on Friday with some early data that's going to help us evaluate, do we have a clear front runner? So I'm going to return to my Netflix example. I want you to imagine that we interviewed a bunch of Netflix customers and they said over and over again, I want to watch live sports. That's the opportunity. That's the need. So we're going to generate 3 different solutions. The first is we could integrate TV channels that show live sports. So here in the United States, maybe right now it's the World Series of Baseball. It's on FS1 and TBS. Netflix could integrate those channels into Netflix. In Latin America, maybe you have some soccer or football leagues. You could integrate whatever TV channels are showing those games. Second solution, we could partner with the different sports leagues and integrate the games directly. Third solution is we could say, look, Fubo TV has already done this work. They're a streaming service that has already partnered with all of these TV channels. Let's just bundle our subscriptions. So we have 3 different solutions that each have the potential to address our target opportunity. We want to rapidly test which looks most promising. So the way to do that is we're going to break these solutions into their underlying assumptions. Now, assumptions tend to fall into 5 categories. So I'm going to walk through those quickly. The first is we make desirability assumptions. Does anybody want our solution? And are they willing to do what we need them to do to get value from it? Viability assumptions are, is this solution good for our business? If we're an outcome-driven team, it's as simple as, if we built this solution, will it address our opportunity in a way that will drive our outcome? Feasibility assumptions are, is it possible? Can we build it? Does the necessary technology exist? Do we have the necessary skills and abilities on our team to pull it off? I'm going to add 2 more categories. The fourth is usability assumptions. Can people find it? Do they understand it? Are our customers able to do what we need them to do? And the 5th is ethical assumptions. Is there any potential harm in building this idea? This is where we can look at the data that we collect, how we're storing it, how we're using it, who we're selling it to. It's also where we can look at social justice and inequity issues. Who are we choosing to serve? Who are we leaving out? Okay, so there's a lot that we can look at. If you know these 5 categories, it'll help you generate assumptions. You can ask, what are the desirability assumptions we're making? What are the feasibility assumptions we're making? But it still can be hard to see many of your assumptions because they feel so true to us, we're often blind to them. So I'm going to give you another strategy for how to quickly generate assumptions. We can story map to help us surface assumptions. If you're not familiar with story mapping, it's the yellow boxes on this slide. We're going to fast forward into the future and we're going to assume our solution already exists. So in this case, we've already integrated live TV channels into Netflix, and we're going to ask, what does our customer have to do to get value from this solution? So we're going to start with, they have to decide they want to watch the game. They have to choose a streaming service. In this case, we want them to choose Netflix. They have to open that streaming service. They have to choose a channel, and then they have to watch the game. That's the yellow boxes. That's my story map. Now, below the yellow boxes are some gray boxes. These are my assumptions. The way that I'm generating my assumptions is I'm going step by step through my story map, and I'm asking what needs to be true in order for my subscriber to do each step. So for example, in order for my subscriber to decide to want to watch a game, they have to be a sports fan. In order for them to decide to choose Netflix, they have to want to watch sports on Netflix, meaning they have to not already have a provider that satisfies that need. In order for them to know what channel to choose, they have to know what channel the game is on. We have to be able to partner with that channel, right? So I can go step by step through my story map and generate a series of assumptions. The value of doing this is testing assumptions is faster than testing whole ideas. We're also going to see that each of our solutions has unique assumptions. If we're partnering with Fubo TV, it has its own set of assumptions. Our customers, things like our customers will install a second app. We'll be able to partner with Fubo TV. If we're partnering with sports leagues, we have assumptions like we'll be able to partner with those sports leagues, or our customers will know which league the game they want to watch is in. So each solution has different assumptions. If we rapidly test those assumptions, it's going to help us collect the compare and contrast data we need to make a better decision. So very quickly here, I'm going to give you a few different ways to rapidly test assumptions. The first is we can prototype to test a specific assumption. So we're not prototyping the whole solution. We may not even be prototyping an interface. We're prototyping to simulate a specific moment. So in this example, if I'm trying to test the assumption our subscribers want to watch sports, I just need to simulate the moment when you're making a decision. And so I actually don't need to prototype an interface at all. I could hand you a list of options with some TV shows, some movies, some sporting events, and say, what would you like to watch right now? And let you choose. If I have access to an unmoderated testing platform, I can test this assumption in 24 hours. The second way I can test this assumption is with a one-question survey. This again lives within your product or service. It's just one question. It takes a second to answer. And I'm just going to ask, have you watched a sporting event in the past week? And as long as I have any traffic whatsoever, I can collect survey responses in a day or two. So this is a very fast way to test this assumption. The third way I can test this assumption is I can look at existing behavioral data and ask, do we already have evidence that our customers are sports fans? So what do I mean by that? I can look at behavioral analytics. I can look at search queries. I can look at support tickets. Are people already asking for sports? I can talk to our account managers. In this case, I might think maybe our subscribers are already searching for sports, and I'm going to go look and see if any of our search queries are about sports and see if we already have evidence that we have sports fans among our subscribers. Now, these first three strategies are going to help you test the vast majority of your assumptions. The one exception is feasibility assumptions. For those, we're going to want to rely on a research spike. A research spike is just a time-boxed activity where we tell our engineers to go investigate something. In order for it to be an appropriate assumption test, we need to get really specific. So in this case, I might have a feasibility assumption. Let's say I'm going to integrate a TV channel into Netflix. It's a live feed of that TV channel. And I'm concerned, I want to be able to show in the Netflix interface what's on that channel right now. So I want to make sure that that TV feed can give me an appropriate title, an appropriate description, and an appropriate image. So I might tell my engineers, go collect 24 hours worth of API data and tell me what percentage of the time we get appropriate data. So it's very targeted. This is allowing me to compare and contrast how easy or difficult is it going to be to implement this solution. Excuse me. So what we're doing is we're breaking our solutions into underlying assumptions. That's allowing us to rapidly test our assumptions so that we can compare and contrast which solution looks most promising. We're looking for a clear front runner that's going to help us find the solution that has the potential to address the target opportunity in a way that will drive our outcome. So these two primary research methods, interviewing to discover opportunities and assumption testing to quickly evaluate solutions, are what's going to allow us to be an outcome-driven team on a continuous cadence. Now, I know I covered a lot of ground pretty quickly. So what I'm going to share is everything that I talked about today is covered in my book, Continuous Discovery Habits. This book was designed to be a hands-on practical guide to help product trios put these habits into practice. It is available at bookstores around the world. I recommend you picking up a copy. All right, Brenda, I think we're ready for questions.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you so much. We want to encourage participants to post their questions in the chat. If anyone's interested in asking a live question, whether in Spanish or in English, you can raise your hand. But we already have a question submitted by Claudia, and she's asking you, an opportunity is like an initiative for each opportunity, or for each opportunity, you could have more than one initiative. So
yes, let's talk through this a little bit. So opportunity represents a customer need, a customer pain point, or a customer desire. So in our Netflix example, the need was, I want to watch sports. Maybe that's really a desire, right? Like I want to watch live sports. From there, there's lots of ways we could solve it. That's why we're comparing and contrasting. And you might release a solution and realize you need to build more to solve it. So you might end up releasing several initiatives to really fully address that need.
Thank you. Thank you, Teresa. So we have Marcelo. You can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, thank you. I figure out if we can skip or discover another domain specific to our product. We can go to different ways, or we have to maintain the same domain that we are discovering continually.
Yeah, so I think if I understand your question, it's about, are you discovering in the same domain week over week? So it starts with this idea of you're focused on an outcome. Your outcome should be pretty stable, right? So maybe you focus on an outcome for a quarter, even quarter to quarter, it shouldn't change a lot. Maybe it changes a little bit. So generally the opportunity space that you're exploring should be the same opportunity space. It'll change as you learn more and it will evolve as you learn more, but you shouldn't like 1 week learn about one space and then the next week jump to a completely different space. It'll take time to learn about a space. So what I mean by that is like using our Netflix example, if one team is focused on retention, they don't want to 1 week focus on retention and the next week focus on acquisition. That's probably two different teams, where one is focused on acquisition over time, the other is focused on retention over time.
Thanks, Teresa.
Thank you for your answer.
We have one more question. This one's from Laura, and she's asking, does the same team perform discovery and delivery?
Yes, definitely. So that was part of that definition of, we want to make sure the team that is building the product is engaging with customers directly. And that's because we don't want to have handoffs. Every time we hand off from one team to another team, we lose context, we lose detail, and the delivery team, while they're building, they're going to run into questions that they need to get fast answers to through their own discovery work. So we want to make sure it's the same people.
Thank you. And I see Mariana, she unmuted herself. Mariana, would you like to ask a question? Or are there any other questions that you would like to post in the chat? All right. Well, in that case, we thank you so much, Teresa, for being here and for joining. Oh, there's one more question from Sandra. She's asking, how do you present results of the findings?
Yeah, really great question. One of the things that I really encourage teams to do is, as they're doing the work, do it in a form that allows you to share the work. So I'll give an example of that. In the book, I introduce an interview snapshot. It's a 1-page template that helps you synthesize what you're learning from each interview. So it's helping you do your work. It's also a really nice visual that helps you share what you learned in that interview with other people. The opportunity solution tree is another example of this. Mapping out the opportunity space is going to help you understand, what am I hearing? What am I learning? What do I understand about the opportunity space? And the visual is a nice way to communicate with other people. So throughout the book, I try to give you a lot of different visuals that will help you do the work and also share it with other people.
Thank you very much, Teresa. So one more time, thank you so much for joining us in this event. We really appreciate your contribution. It was an amazing session and super enlightening for us. So with no further ado,
You are muted,
You're mute, Brenda.
Brenda, you muted yourself.
thank you guys. All right, thanks everyone. Gracias. So Teresa, one more time, thank you so much for being here and for joining us. This was a really enlightening conversation for us. We really appreciate you. And for everyone, you can continue this conversation if you're interested in spatial chat. I think Teresa, you have access to, and I posted the link. So if anyone's interested in continuing the conversation there, you can do that. And thank you one more time. We hope to see you all in other sessions. Muchas gracias a todos. Nos esperamos en más sesiones.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.